Hi, and welcome to the OT is In, the podcast where we merge the worlds of education and occupational therapy to empower families like yours. I'm Sarah Collins, your host, an occupational therapist and a homeschooling parent. I've experienced occupational therapy by supporting families for over 15 years, but also through seeking out support of my own children, so I'm right here in the trenches with you. Though there is not one way to educate your child, there is a lot to consider when individualizing an education. And the goal of this podcast is to explain some of the why behind what an occupational therapist is thinking so you can apply it to your own family. Especially with my three favorite topics: executive functioning, handwriting, and sensory processing. Each episode will be packed with practical tips, expert interviews, and real-life stories aimed at helping you to create a supportive learning environment for your child. So, grab your headphones and get ready to dive in of the collision of education and occupational therapy. I'm Sarah Collins from Homeschool OT, and I'm thrilled to have you with me on this journey of discovery. Welcome to the OT is In, the podcast that brings occupational therapy and learning strategies right to your everyday life. I'm your host, Sarah Collins, and today I am joined by Dr. Michelle Parrinello-Cason, a fellow homeschool mom, writer, and educator with a PhD in rhetoric and composition. Michelle is passionate about exploring stories and ideas that embrace complexity, and in this episode, we dive into how note-taking can become a powerful learning tool for your children. We'll talk about shifting the focus from creating a perfect product to engaging fully in the process. After all, if not every brain is the same, why should all notes be the same? Michelle also shares practical approaches like Cornell Notes, sketchnoting, and annotating to help students organize their thoughts and deepen their understanding. So whether you're new to homeschooling, now have teenagers that need to learn note-taking skills, or you're just looking for different strategies to support your child's learning, this conversation definitely has something for you. So let's get started. Hey, and welcome back to the OT is In. Today I have another homeschool mom, but also doctor. So this is Dr. Parrinello-Cason, and she has a wealth of knowledge as far as reading, as far as understanding literature, and also what we're going to dive into today is how we begin to think about that and express it ourselves through note-taking. So before we get going, Michelle, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and your journey in your own education and as a homeschooling parent?
Sure, absolutely. I'm really excited to be here. I started homeschooling unexpectedly when my daughter was in kindergarten. She is we now know, a neurodivergent child who just wasn't finding a great fit in the public school system. And after several different tries, we kind of gave up, and I was homeschooling as sort of an emergency stopgap. And then I realized that a lot of our problems were solved
Yeah.
through not all of them, but just there was so much more where I was able to individualize the way things were delivered and give her more time for breaks and just bring things to her at her pace and when she was most able to meet the challenge. And at the time that I did that, I was a college professor a full-time professor at a community college teaching English with a focus on remedial writing. So students who had come into college and tested as not college ready and had to take extra coursework to be able to get into the college credit bearing classes.
Mhm.
And I just found my worlds really colliding because a lot of the work that I was doing at the college level, a lot of it was just kind of frustrated by the limits of an institution.
Yeah, I was
And I
going to say
couldn't
by the environment for sure.
exactly. And I couldn't always kind of implement my teaching philosophy to its fullest, but I was able to do that with my daughter. And I was like, man, this would be really great to do on a broader scale. And so I started kind of testing the waters with some online classes for homeschooling. And since I was teaching college students, I started with high schoolers, which was
Yeah.
more close to the work that I was familiar with. And then as my daughter got older, I kind of worked backwards and met her for middle school curriculum and started doing that as well. And so, yeah, I now teach middle and high school classes online for the homeschooling community, and it is amazing. I love the community of learners and parents that I've gotten to know through that. And it has just absolutely affirmed so many of my teaching philosophy beliefs to get to see learners just really bloom when you can meet them where they are and have the trust in them to have big ideas, even if they don't always have the exact academic skills to express it the way that we might want them to, but to give them the space to figure that out. It's just fantastic.
I love when you're saying, they may not have that specific skill to express what they already know, but that doesn't mean that they don't know it. Like that's what gets me
Exactly.
so excited. Yes. Oh, I bet there's other parents who are excited right now and saying, "Oh, I need to find her." Where do people find your classes?
Oh, yeah. I run a website called Dayla Learning. That's Dayla Learning. You can go to daylalearning.com and I've got my class schedule up there. You can also follow me on Facebook or Instagram. Both of those are just Dayla Learning. And I would be happy to have new members of the community and happy to share the classes and resources and also just the great community of other parents that are a wealth of knowledge themselves.
Great. So, part of being able to get our ideas out, two things, like to get our ideas out, but then also to make sure that we are consuming, the information that is being taught to us is note taking. And there is frequently times that I'm asked by parents concerned about handwriting and also concerned about their children's like working memory, like whether they're able to take in this information, hold it just long enough to get it down on paper to know about is note taking actually necessary? And especially now in our digital age. So can we break that down? What do you think is note taking necessary?
Absolutely. I think that note taking is necessary, but I feel like sometimes we have a very specific picture in our mind of what note taking is based on how we learned it or based on what works for us. And so sometimes I think we can get really hung up on a product instead of the process. And so I think the
That's true with
process,
everything.
so I definitely think the process of note
Yeah.
taking is necessary, but I think we really need to let go of a lot of expectations on what that might look like because really note taking is our thought process made external, right? It's taking
Yeah.
what's happening inside of our minds and putting it out onto paper or a screen where it can be seen. And there's a lot of vulnerability in that to put your thought process somewhere where someone else can peek into it. And it also can just really showcase that we don't think about things the same
The
way.
same way. Yeah.
And that's not even necessary. I mean, it's definitely true of like neurodivergence, but it's true just among any two individuals. The way that we approach something can just be really different.
Mhm.
And the way that we remember it can be really different. I remember when I was in graduate school, I was in a communications class with another student who every single class she would come and she would lay out this elaborate set of multicolored markers. And I would watch her while we were in class, like while the professor was lecturing, and she would just be grabbing one pen and another. And at one time after class, I was like, what are, and she was
Right.
like, oh, well, yellow is for vocabulary and pink is for people and blue is for questions I want to ask the professor later. And green is for the, and I was like, ooh, that is not, my brain could never, ever, ever do that. And here I am with my like one pen.
But I love that pink was for people. You're like, I remember this all these years later. Pink and people.
And so it obviously, I mean, we both did well in the class.
Yeah.
We were both able to write good papers and participate well, but the note taking process looked so different. And so I think that just accepting that you've got to have some experimentation and you've got to have some wiggle room
Yeah.
and you've got to let go of expectations that your learners' notes are going to look like what you think they should look like. But I do think that the process itself is very valuable and still worth teaching.
Yeah, absolutely. So we a few years ago, well, last year actually, it was my son and I. So my son is now working through like learning to take notes himself. And so we found a topic that he loved. Like we were watching Shark Week. Every year we watch Shark Week. It's like when unlimited screens are fine in my house, like we just go to town on it. And I wanted us to practice it together. And I found myself getting held up in the way that he was doing it. So I remember vividly in fifth grade, all of us sitting on the floor, and the teacher would be writing down the notes on the board, like in outline format. This is what she wanted us to know. Basically saying, here's what's important. Now you copy it down, and then you already know like what's there. And so we learned this outline form, and I still take notes in that outline form. So though I'm kind of, when I look back, I'm like, that's dumb that they told us exactly what we needed to know. But the format for me was great. My son does not think anywhere near in the same way that I did. And so when he was watching it, one, he kept getting confused by if I hit a Roman numeral and then I need to, move in with A and one and two and like what? He was drawing pictures throughout the whole thing, which then because of that, I was like, we need to look up sketchnoting so you can see like this is clearly the way that you're going to work. But it was a lot of dismantling for myself. Do you find that some with yours?
Absolutely, absolutely. And a couple of things that you mentioned in there, like the teacher giving the notes and being like, just copy this down. There was a lot of that, I think, especially like in when I was younger, like in middle school, because the idea was that you were removing some of that like cognitive load for the students. But
Yeah.
there's actually been a lot of research that the students need to struggle through figuring out what the key ideas are, or
Yeah.
it doesn't do the cognitive work of connecting to our
Yeah, we're not
memories in the same way.
synthesizing that information ourselves. It was just like,
Exactly.
here it is.
Though there has been research, interestingly, there has been research that shows that if a teacher creates their own notes and gives it to students in the classroom after they have taken their own notes, and then they look at them side by side and can be like, oh, I didn't put this point in, or oh,
Yeah.
that works really well.
Oh, yeah, that's great. And I
Yeah,
guess that's kind of what my son and I were doing, like where I was taking it, he was taking it, and then we were kind of comparing of like, okay, so what did I pick up that you didn't? What did you pick up that I didn't?
and if anybody has like a co-op situation where you have kids that are doing that together, having them take notes individually and then talk about their notes, not necessarily, in my opinion, not necessarily making them show each other their notes, because
Yeah,
again, it can be really vulnerable to be like, this
right.
is what it looks like. But just to like then get in a circle and discuss that, and then they get to take different notes even
Yeah.
on it, like annotating their own notes with that conversation. Like I've had them do it, like, change pen colors now so you can see what you
Yeah.
added later and what you took the first time. It really makes it a dynamic experience.
Yeah. That sounds exciting. I'm like, oh, maybe I'll do this in my own homeschool next year. That's great. So, what are some types of notes if there are kids that need to be explicitly taught, like how to get their thoughts out on paper? What are some ideas to do so, or are there strategies or specific types that we should be looking for?
There absolutely are strategies. And the research shows us that explicit instruction in note taking strategies is really important because it's just really amorphous to say take notes.
Yeah.
And we're just like, oh, okay, I get
Okay.
write words
Right.
down. So like modeling by showing different notes that you've taken, or showing, videos. There's a really, you mentioned sketchnoting. There's a really good video from a YouTube channel called Verbal to Visual, where he talks about Cornell Notes, but then adds sketchnoting to them. And it's a fantastic video. I show it in, I teach a note taking class, and I show that video in there so that students can see how to implement this. So he does a really great job of like the video sped up and he's showing you what he's drawing as he's doing it.
And I made sure
So
that that's linked in the show notes as
yeah,
well.
it's a great resource. So the basic forms that I teach in my note taking class, I teach Cornell Notes, and it is considered kind of the gold standard because it builds in reviewing it later. So if you're not familiar, Cornell Notes is great because all you need to do it is something to write with in a single piece of paper. And as long as you have that, you can take Cornell Notes, because sometimes there's some good note taking systems, but they're so elaborate that
Yeah,
it's
paint
like,
for people.
yeah, exactly. You need to have four different color highlighters and two different color pens and this special printed paper, and we don't always have that available.
Right.
So Cornell Notes, if you have paper and something to write with, you can do it. And so what you do is you break the page into four sections. So you draw like a line across the top, and that top section is like a little skinny part where you put your title, the date, any like information you need to get back to later. And then you draw a line down the left hand side that is off center, so that there's a bigger section on the right and a smaller section on the left. And then you draw a line across the bottom so that you have sort of a footer of sorts. And so while you take your notes, you only write in that large section that's in the
Okay.
middle of the page. Those are your in the moment notes. And if you run out of room there, you flip the page and you maybe have done this line on several pages and just keep writing. You don't do anything to the left-hand column or the bottom until you're completely finished with taking your notes. And then immediately after you finish taking your notes, you go and you look at the left-hand column and you just write down the key ideas from that page. So that if you're flipping back through your notes later, you don't have to reread all that mess that you've taken in the
Yeah.
middle. You can immediately see the list of like, these were the key ideas from this page. And then at the bottom, you write a summary in your own words. And it could just be like one sentence, just really like getting it into your own language to be
Yeah.
like, on this, we learned that blah, blah, blah is the most important part of the brain or whatever.
Right.
Um, and so just kind of having that there where you very rarely in review go back and reread the whole messy part. You have
Right.
pulled the key things out of it and put them into a place that's a lot easier to view. And so I think the reason that Cornell Notes, which are decades old at this point, the reason they've become kind of the gold standard is because one, they're easy to do and well, easy to create the
Mhm.
template at least. And two, they build in that looking back at your notes, which is a
Yeah,
really key
that
part.
in synthesis of information that we were talking about earlier, you're already doing that kind of at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. And it doesn't feel like, an assignment the way
Yeah.
some other, I remember being in school and taking notes and my teacher being like, you need at least 2 bullet
Yeah.
points underneath this thing or it's insufficient. And I was like, I didn't have a second bullet point, right? Like,
Yeah, or like you can't have, if you have an A, you have to have a B because
right.
otherwise you're breaking. I'm like, I don't know.
No, I'm just making things up. That's not going to be good.
This episode of The OT is In is sponsored by CTC Math and the new Executive Functioning for Teens course from Homeschool OT. We have used CTC Math in our homeschool for 4 years now, and it continues to be a favorite. My kids actually enjoy the lessons, especially when they hear, "That's all for the lesson. Good luck on your questions." And they repeat it in their best Australian accents, which clearly I did not try right there, but they love it. What I love most is the flexibility. When my son hit a wall with fractions, we simply went back a grade to strengthen the basics and then moved forward when he was ready. CTC Math lets you move at your child's pace, not a set curriculum's timeline. You can try it out at ctcmath.com. And speaking of personalized learning, if your teen struggles with starting tasks, managing time, or finishing what they start, we've got something for that too. Our brand new Executive Functioning for Teens course is designed to help the student understand the 11 brain-based skills that impact everything that they do, from getting ready in the morning to turning in that writing assignment. Each week includes short video lessons, a companion guide, workbook practice, and even a novel study to help them recognize these skills in action and in themselves. Plus, I built in plenty of suggestions to modify the course based on your teen's needs and goals. You can check this out now at homeschoolot.com. Now, back to the show. Welcome back. We're going to dive into the next topic of note-taking, or the type. Really, since we were talking about outlining before, this could be your B under note-taking.
If you are taking notes at home,
Right?
you get
Or your
all
Roman
the letters.
numeral number 2. What's your next type of note-taking?
So then, so after I introduce them to Cornell Notes, we go over sketchnoting using the video that I talked about. And I mostly talk about sketchnoting as a way to enhance other kinds of note taking, because very rarely is sketchnoting on its own enough to capture all of the kinds of information you need.
Mm-hmm.
But for learners who really like sketching and who are really visual, knowing that they have that freedom to think about sometimes a complex idea needs that for them.
Yeah.
And when we say sketchnoting, that doesn't necessarily mean, like you mentioned, Shark Week, doesn't necessarily mean drawing pictures of a shark, though it might, but it also means like a little mind map or, columns or bullet points or just things that kind of add some of those visual flow for how the ideas go together for those learners. So we go over Cornell Notes, sketchnoting, and then the third one we talk about is guided notes, which are notes where often the teacher has provided some kind of template where you're filling in blanks. And the best guided notes are the ones that are created specifically for that class, for that assignment. So this is kind of like your teacher writing the outline on the board and telling you, hey, write this down.
Right.
But instead of having it all written down, they might have had all the headings and then let you fill in the subcategories for yourself. Or I make book guides for students. So I give them a reading guide. So I've got key questions or like a character chart to fill out, but they still have to do the work of thinking through that and putting in that information.
Okay.
And so I'm taking away some of the cognitive load of deciding what's important to pay attention to, but I'm still making them do the work of doing the attention and
Doing
putting
it.
it in their own
Mhm.
words.
Fascinating.
But you don't always have guided notes for
Yeah, I
every
always
class
have
or
that
every
format.
assignment. So you can also use some templates. A Venn diagram is technically
Yeah.
guided notes, right?
Okay.
Or like a book report template, or some people might be familiar with the KWL, like what do I know, what do I wonder, and what have I learned? Like those are guided note templates.
Hmm. Hmm.
So just having those, and I recommend having some of those like printed out and around wherever your
Yeah.
learners are doing work, so that they could just go and grab one and not have to stop to think about like what do I do with this? They're like, oh,
Right.
here are some templates. I can just grab one and start filling out.
I was even today just looking on Canva when I was talking to my daughter about something about concept maps is what we were thinking through. And I looked on Canva and there's like 9 million options that then you can print and edit yourself. So I'm sure, if you put in, guided notes into Canva, I bet it would print out lots of
Yes.
different options for that.
Yes, absolutely. And I think having different options on hand, because different, like if you're doing a history class, well, then a timeline might make a lot of sense. But if
Yeah.
you're working on literary analysis, then a different kind of template might make sense. So having like multiple options available is just selecting those is kind of
Yeah.
part of the mental process of like, what kind of information do I
Yeah.
need to get down?
Yes, that's true. Because if they're just thinking, I have this one piece of paper and this is all I can use here, but then, we're saying if we can search in even on Canva or on Pinterest or whatever, that search might get our kids inspired in itself and begin that thought process of synthesizing that information.
My favorite is when a kid's like, well, I can make a better template than this. And I'm like, oh yeah, can you?
Yeah,
And
can you make it
yeah.
happen? That's not what I wanted you to do at all.
No, no, definitely don't figure out your own way to organize your information.
So, what about kids who really struggle with handwriting? So, what can we do to support them? And should we continue to be working on handwriting to use that within note taking?
So there is research that shows that handwriting helps us retain information more than typing. But with some caveats, that research is still fairly new. So it might not, as time goes on, I think for one thing, we might find out that kids who grew up always typing might process information differently than somebody like
Interesting.
me who
That's
didn't
true.
learn to type until high school, right?
Mhm.
Um, Also, the best notes are the notes your kid will actually take, right? If it's such a struggle to get note taking that you're also struggling through handwriting, if you need to separate those tasks so that they are something you can actually do, then separate those tasks.
Girl, you're speaking to my OT heart here, where, I love handwriting. I think handwriting is important. And one of the studies that we cite all the time, occupational therapists are like, it really matters with your brain. Like we cite these studies that are, and I completely agree with that. But I also love the way that you're like, if we need to separate the tasks, because if our children are so focused on the actual writing that they're not able to take in the information, then your note taking isn't doing a darn thing. Right.
Yeah. And that's another place where I think you can use those guided notes
Mhm.
to take some of the cognitive load off. And then maybe it's, instead of writing whole paragraphs of description, you've got
Mhm.
a chart there and you're like, write one key word to describe
Yeah.
each character, or write what. I think there's ways that you can slowly include more handwriting into the note taking without those two becoming so closely linked that if
Right.
one frustrates the other, they shut down on both of them, right? I
Right.
think doing the work is what we want
Yeah.
to see. So
Yeah.
whatever it takes to make that possible.
And as much as I'm like teasing about this pink person thing, I'm actually thinking back to if we had, guided notes and, our student is highlighting in pink whenever they talk about a person throughout the lecture or a date. I don't remember what the other colors were, but, a concept or vocabulary, I think you said was yellow. Like if they're reading through these notes and highlighting them in different colors, they're pulling out those important parts as well without the
Absolutely.
handwriting.
Which brings me to my very favorite kind of note taking, which is annotation. That's the kind I use most often. I know that there are some we never write in books proponents out there, but they now make, if you're really devoted to not writing your book, they make clear post-it notes. You could just put the whole thing over top
Like,
of your page and write on it. But I'm a fan of writing in books. I love
yep.
getting annotated books from other people. It's like a
I
little
do
like,
too.
oh, like
Me
letters from my
too.
friends.
I even remember back when I was getting married 20 years ago, and somebody gave me I think it was like chicken soup for the bride's soul. Like this was when these things were like big, right? And it had all these different notes of her wedding or like stories that she had thought of from reading it. It was like a treasure. But then she
Yeah.
told me that the next wedding I was in, I had to give it away. And I was like, but I liked it.
Oh yeah. So
But we
you're,
did.
yeah.
We passed it on. I mean, and it's such a great thing. But every one of my books, nonfiction, I would say most fiction books that I'm reading just for fun, I'm not writing it, but nonfiction books, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, and I love having an annotation system that, again, I can do with any
Mhm.
writing implement, right? Like I can do it with a pencil, I can do it with a pen, doesn't matter what color it is. And so I have a pretty elaborate symbol system that you can go back and look at books that I wrote in from undergrad and
Yeah,
see that I have the same symbol system, like that I use stars for like key ideas, a star with a circle around it for like I might want to put this in my paper. I
yeah,
underline key phrases. I put boxes around key vocabulary words. I circle people and places. It's the same system, and it has been the same system for over 20 years. And I can pick up a book that I have not read in
yeah.
15 years and start flipping through that, and the memories just come back because that symbol system is so ingrained into the thinking that I did. And so for kids who don't like to write a lot, annotation is a way to get that handwriting involved, but without the pressure of having to write lots and without having to
Great.
write neat. They can develop their own symbols, and it's a great step.
Great. Yeah, that is an excellent idea. Like, and to let people experience and experiment with different options and then come up with their own system that then they can carry over. That's so great.
Yeah, in my note-taking class, we introduce all those different strategies and then we practice taking notes on different formats. So
Yeah.
we do an online article so that they can print it if they want to annotate it, but it's like a short informative article. Then we do like we do a video, like a TED Ed video.
Mhm.
Then we do a short story so that they get to practice kind of that literary analysis, which really is
Yeah.
different because it doesn't have those signposts the way that an informative article does. And then we do a visual, a print ad, so that we know how to take notes on something that's just like one page of picture. How do you take
Right.
notes on that? So we talk about that. And by the end, they have really developed a system of their own note taking. And I have them fill out a little chart about like, what are the pros and cons of each one of these for you? And
Yeah.
which one are you most likely to use again? And which ones are you never going to use again? And I think that just having to reflect back on that.
Yeah, so that's bringing in that whole metacognition of it, the
Exactly.
executive functioning skill of I'm going to think about how I'm thinking here and get to know myself a little bit better. That is great. So what you've already told me a little bit the, verbal to visual video that you do. What are some of the other resources that you would recommend for families who are starting to work through this?
So I definitely recommend having Cornell Note
Okay.
prepped materials, whether your student draws the lines on them themselves or you have some printed out ones where you just go through and have a whole notebook that you've done that to so they could get to them quickly. I recommend giving some direct instruction in that.
Yeah.
So like, and there's a million. If you just want to go on YouTube and go, I would recommend like getting one that's from a library.
Mhm.
Like almost all of the major like college libraries will have a like how to take Cornell notes video. You could
Yeah.
do that. And also just kind of having those templates around.
Mhm.
So I think, like you mentioned, that if you just go on Canva and write
Yeah.
like note templates, tons of them are going to come up.
Gonna
And I
come right
wouldn't
out.
overwhelm. I, if your learner is old enough, like having them pick out the ones that they like the look of,
Yep.
or like you could even create your own color scheme and like
Uh-huh.
be like, let's make 5 of these and in our color scheme and print them out, so that
That's
you have
so
those
much more
stacks around.
motivating. That was a
Yeah.
key for my daughter to be like, well, this is the way that I'm going to think. Great, and then to find her own ideas or her own format and be able to print it out and take notes on that. Or, so here's something that I'm a little bit less familiar with because when I was going through school, it wasn't as digital, obviously, as it is now. What about digital note taking?
So I do them in because I want them free. So I do
Yeah.
them in Google Slides, and I
Okay.
just change the slideshow to be the 8.5 by 11 size, and I
Mhm.
upload a template as the background so that they can then write on top of it without it being distorted. so that it's just like kind of behind the slide. And then they can even like drop pictures in if they did a sketch and want to put it on there, or they can
Yeah.
put in text boxes and type, or they can put in symbols if they wanted. And so I use Google Slides as a way to turn what would have been like a printed, fill this out by hand sheet
Right.
into something they can fill out digitally with a lot of flexibility.
Beautiful. Michelle, thank you so much for being here. I think this is so much wonderful information, but that parents can actually take and help their kids, their teenagers, their middle schoolers, whatever, to really implement, today. So thank you so much.
Thank you. This has been great. I love geeking out over note taking. So
Me too. Me too. Before you go, I've got a quick tip and a freebie that you do not want to miss. Executive functioning skills like planning, impulse control, and time management are absolutely essential for our kids, but they don't always come naturally. And that's why I put together a resource called Games That Teach Executive Functioning. It's a downloadable guide that includes fun, simple games, ones that you may already own. They support skills like working memory, flexible thinking, and more. It's perfect for families who want to learn, but let it feel like play, or who recognize that you really learn through play. So head on over to homeschoolot.com and grab your copy. You can go to the shop tab and find it. So let's make building executive functioning skills more doable and fun. Thank you so much for being here, and grab your copy.